May 1945. Germany's cities lie in ruins, and among the rubble stand millions of teenagers once hailed as the future of the Reich. They wore uniforms, carried rifles, and swore loyalty to Hitler. Now the war is over, and they face an empty world. What happened to them after the Reich collapsed? When Adolf Hitler came to power in January 1933, the Hitler Youth was still a small, fragmented organization. Founded in 1926 as the Hitlerjugend Bund Deutscher Arbeiterjugend, it had fewer than 100,000 members. Within a decade, it would command the loyalty of nearly every boy and girl in Nazi Germany. Under Reich youth leader Walter von Schirach, appointed in 1931, the movement expanded rapidly. The Nazis saw the youth as the foundation of their future state, and Schirach's task was to shape them into the Führer's image. In December 1936, the Law on the Hitler Youth made membership a civic duty for all Aryan boys and girls between 10 and 18. 3 years later, the Youth Service Decree of March 1939 made participation compulsory by law. Every child was to be trained physically, politically, and ideologically to serve the Reich. The Hitler Youth was divided by age and gender. Boys aged 10 to 14 joined the Deutsches Jungvolk, where they learned basic drills, camping, and nationalist songs. At 14, they advanced to the Hitlerjugend, which emphasized endurance, marksmanship, and obedience. Girls entered the Bund Deutscher Mädel, League of German Girls, focusing on homemaking, nursing, and physical fitness. Together, these branches turned adolescence into state service. The weekly meetings, marches, and weekend camps blurred childhood into militarized loyalty. When war began on September 1, 1939, the Hitler Youth shifted from preparation to participation. Teenagers served as air raid messengers, fire watchers, and anti-aircraft auxiliaries. By 1943, as Germany's losses mounted, older boys trained in the HJ Flieger, HJ Marine, and Streifendienst units that directly fed into the Wehrmacht and Waffen-SS. Many 17-year-olds saw combat on the Eastern Front or in flak batteries defending German cities. In 1944, as Allied armies advanced, Hitler called upon his youngest followers once more. Thousands were drafted into the Volkssturm, Germany's last-ditch militia. Some units fought fiercely, such as the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, formed mostly of volunteers born in 1926. At Normandy, they gained notoriety for fanatic discipline but suffered catastrophic losses. Others defended Berlin itself in April 1945, armed with Panzerfausts and propaganda-fueled courage. By the time the Reich fell, the Hitler Youth had lost its purpose and its innocence. Millions of members were displaced, orphaned, and traumatized. Their leaders fled or were captured. Schirach was arrested in 1945 and later tried at Nuremberg. Arthur Axmann, who succeeded him in 1940, went underground until his capture the next year. Historians still disagree over the responsibility of these young followers. Some point to coercion. After 1939, membership was mandatory. Others see the results of years of conditioning and belief. What is certain is that by war's end, Germany's so-called future generation stood among its greatest victims. Children turned into soldiers, left to rebuild a shattered world. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, the Hitler Youth disappeared almost overnight. Its flags, uniforms, and emblems were hastily buried or burned. The Allied powers, shocked by the degree of indoctrination among German children, moved quickly to dismantle every trace of the organization. On October 10, 1945, the Allied Control Council formally outlawed the Hitler Youth, declaring it a key component of the Nazi state. Its property was confiscated and all activities were banned. The Allies recognized a unique challenge: millions of young Germans shaped by years of totalitarian schooling and propaganda. In the Western zones, the approach was primarily educational. Allied military government directives closed all Nazi-affiliated youth groups and encouraged the creation of new ones under church or civic control. The goal was to re-educate through democracy and civic responsibility, not punishment. Teachers, pastors, and American and British youth officers organized summer camps and discussion groups meant to replace marching songs with open debate. Yet post-war re-education looked very different across occupied Germany. In the Soviet-controlled zone, it took on a distinctly ideological form. The Freie Deutsche Jugend, FDJ, founded in 1946, became the only state-approved youth organization, absorbing thousands of former Hitler Youth members. Communist doctrine replaced Nazi belief, but the structure, uniforms, discipline, and devotion to the state remained familiar. In later years, East German leaders portrayed fascism as a Western sickness, while the FDJ offered its own brand of socialist loyalty. For some, it provided belonging and a sense of redemption. For others, it simply demanded obedience under a new flag. For adult leaders, the reckoning came in courtrooms. At the Nuremberg trials, Baldur von Schirach, who had led the Hitler Youth from 1931 to 40, was charged with crimes against humanity for his role in spreading Nazi ideology and deporting Jews from Vienna as Gauleiter. In October 1946, he received a 20-year prison sentence. His successor, Arthur Axmann, captured in December 1945, was tried later by a German denazification court. In May 1949, he was sentenced to 3 years and 3 months for membership in a criminal organization, but was released soon after, claiming to have broke with Nazism. For the ordinary members, an estimated 8 million at the war's end, the process was less clear. Denazification questionnaires asked about their Hitler Youth activities, though most were classified as followers rather than active offenders. Many were still teenagers or war orphans. Western authorities soon realized that punishing an entire generation was impossible and counterproductive. Instead, they focused on schooling, psychological counseling, and removing Nazi symbols from public life. In 1949, when the Federal Republic of Germany was founded, the issue of guilt among former Hitler Youth largely faded from public debate. Yet beneath the surface, the trauma remained. Many former members spoke of confusion, raised to worship a leader who had vanished, forced to confront the lies they had believed. The Hitler Youth had been dissolved, but its influence lingered in the minds of millions, learning for the first time what freedom and responsibility really meant. By the early 1950s, Germany was rebuilding, and so were the millions of young men and women who had once worn the Hitler Youth uniform. In both East and West, these former members faced the same question: how to live with a past they had been taught to worship and a future that demanded they forget. In West Germany, the Allied occupation gave way to Reconstruction and the rise of the Federal Republic in 1949. Economic revival, the Wirtschaftswunder, created new jobs, homes, and families. Former Hitler Youth members, most now in their 20s or 30s, blended into this recovery. Since membership became mandatory in 1939, few carried a lasting stigma. Teachers, officials, even lawmakers of the new republic often shared the same youth training. Historians have noted that the Hitler Youth generation, born roughly between 1922 and 30, became the backbone of post-war society, disciplined, pragmatic, but often emotionally detached. Public discussion was almost non-existent. The 1950s and 60s became the years of deliberate forgetting. Many Germans saw themselves primarily as victims of war and displacement, rather than as participants in Nazism. In schools, the topic was avoided or treated abstractly. Former members rarely spoke about their experiences, some out of shame, others from a belief that what they had done as children was beyond their control. Only in rare autobiographies, such as those by journalist Alphonse Heck or historian Melita Maschmann, did the voices of the Hitler Youth generation begin to surface. During the 1960s and 70s, as a new generation came of age, the silence began to crack. Students questioned their parents' wartime roles, demanding answers about complicity and moral responsibility. Former Hitler Youth members, now in their 40s, found themselves confronted by their children in living rooms and classrooms alike. Memoirs, documentaries, and early historical studies emerged, exploring how deeply Nazi indoctrination had shaped their worldview. Psychologists later observed a shared emotional pattern: denial entwined with guilt and nostalgia shadowed by unease. Some former Hitler Youth members admitted to moments of pride in the camaraderie and adventure of their youth, followed by lifelong guilt for what that loyalty had served. The contradictions defined their generation, devoted as children, disillusioned as adults. By the 1980s, historians and filmmakers finally began to portray the Hitler Youth not just as perpetrators or victims, but as a lost generation caught in history's machinery. The debates shifted from blame to understanding. How could a society so thoroughly capture the minds of its children, and what lessons did that hold for the modern world? By the late 20th century, the story of the Hitler Youth had become a symbol, not just of Nazism, but of how entire generations can be shaped by ideology. What began as a youth organization ended as one of the most enduring warnings of the modern age. In post-war Germany, official memory evolved slowly. The first West German studies on the Hitler Youth appeared in the 1960s, but only in the 1980s and 90s did schools begin teaching the subject in depth. The children of former members pushed for transparency, demanding to know what their parents had done. Universities hosted conferences on the Hitler Youth generation, exploring how early indoctrination affected democratic values in adulthood. Many former members participated in interviews describing how guilt, silence, and discipline carried over into their post-war lives. The testimonies revealed the human cost of collective manipulation. After reunification in 1990, historians began comparing both systems. Some noted striking continuities: uniforms, slogans, and state loyalty repackaged for a new ideology. That comparison revealed how every totalitarian regime, whatever its ideology, depends on shaping the young to secure its survival. Today, the Hitler Youth remains legally banned in Germany, and its symbols are prohibited under the German Criminal Code. Yet its imagery persists in museums, films, and academic debate. Scholars still argue whether its psychological legacy faded after the 1970s or continued to influence post-war attitudes toward authority, conformity, and civic duty. The truth, as so often in history, lies somewhere between collective forgetting and quiet remembrance. Internationally, educators use the Hitler Youth as a case study in how propaganda targets identity and belonging. Exhibits at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and the Documentation Center in Nuremberg explore how peer pressure, reward systems, and ritual transformed adolescence into obedience. For many visitors, the most unsettling question is not why the Hitler Youth existed, but how easily it could exist again. In the end, their story was not just about an organization's collapse, but about an entire generation's transformation. Their past shows that indoctrination does not end with defeat. The uniforms are gone, but the lessons remain. When a generation is taught to obey rather than think, rebuilding begins not with new laws, but with the courage to question. If you found this video insightful, watch What Happened to the Gestapo After World War II next, a look at how another pillar of Nazi power faced its reckoning. Thanks for watching, like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more History Inside, and we'll see you in the next one.